Hello dear community and welcome from European Forum Alpbach. We have the opportunity to talk to Odelia Torteman, the head of Fintech and Blockchain from Deloitte Israel. Odelia, welcome to our live stream.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You've been talking to a lot of media and journalists. Everybody wants to talk to you about the future of cryptocurrencies, about the past hype of Bitcoin, and about use cases of this technology in other fields. So I'm very grateful to you that you have time for us as well. What was your message here? You're saying about Bitcoin hype is passé, so to say. What's going on in the field of blockchain? What's going on in Israel? What's going on in Europe? Maybe first statement from you. Where is the journey taking us?
Yeah. So I think that first of all, it's important to know that cryptocurrencies being representative by the Bitcoin are only the first use case and the first example of this truly innovative and amazing technology known as the distributed ledger technology. I think that 2017 was indeed the year of cryptocurrencies with regards to reaching to a lot of crowds worldwide and basically reaching out to public acknowledgement. But I think that we are nearly only at the beginning of this amazing journey. I think that the technology and what it holds behind the cryptocurrency, the fact that we're speaking about an immutable database, which is predefined by a set of rules, which is consciously being shared and synced with different entities, different institutions in different geographies, has a lot of potential to change traditional financial processes worldwide, where cryptocurrencies are the only first example of it.
The question is, how do we get there? We're in a situation when the ecosystem is still maturing. We had a phase of, let's say, scam ICO, so to say. We have a phase of understanding technology on the corporate side. Where do you see where we're standing at the moment?
Yeah. So this actually, the question is divided into a couple of pillars. First, in terms of the maturity of the technology. So despite the fact that everybody is speaking about Bitcoin and about blockchain, the technology is still young. And as being such, it has a lot of mileage, I would say, to go forward in order to truly assimilate and provide the best solution to the specific use case that it chooses to target. So on that term, we are at the beginning of the journey. We're seeing more and more enterprises which are experimenting with blockchain applications. Obviously, the financial service industry is being the first and forward, but we're seeing other industries as well. Supply chain, healthcare, governments, manufacturing, so many different applications and use cases which are relevant for that. And I think that as the, society, enterprises and businesses are becoming more and more familiar with this technology, as regulation aligns and basically enables a framework, which is an enabling regulatory framework that supports that, we will see the technology consolidate into much more adaptation. To your questions around ICOs. So we've seen a lot of hype around ICO, especially in 2017 with billions of dollars that being raised. I think some enterprises did it, I would say, for the right reasons. Others have been using ICO, as another instrument to raising fund in a super quick way without having to provide equity to investors. But in that sense, I think that also in the ICO place, the industry is maturing. We're seeing, the public of investors who are being much more critical around that. The standardization, even if we don't have currently one, a concrete regulation framework around ICO, we're seeing that regulatory framework are developing. So we're seeing, for example, the differentiation between utility tokens and security tokens, and even, hybrid mobile models that combines the two. So we're seeing that regulation is working towards that. Also, we're seeing that, I would say, if a year ago, we saw much more early stage startups that tried to launch an ICO for the sake of basically raising funds. Now we're seeing much more mature companies, even publicly traded companies that are basically entering towards the ICO world, not only for the mere benefit of raising funds, but also to expand their business value proposition, to enter new markets.
Do you think, in Austria, we're talking about the question whether ICO is a legitimate tool to raise funds, or should it only be used to develop the blockchain technology further? Do you have opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that ICO should be used not just as a way to raise funds. It has to be tied with the blockchain business model. It has to be applications that are literally built on and are using and being supported by different distributed ledger technologies, either infrastructure-wise or different applications-wise. It can't be used just, as a mean to raise funds because it's defeating its purposes. The idea of an ICO is really to use the distributed character of the distributed ledger and to make it much more educated and much more, efficient for different applications.
In terms of the regulatory surroundings and environment, can we learn something from Israel? Do you have in ecosystem also, like you said, regulations towards ICOs, regulations toward blockchain technology in general?
Yeah. So Israel, I think, is a very unique example on that sense, because this country is being built and based substantially on the human capital of Israel. And a lot of the economy of the country is being built on the amazing technological developments that are taking place. And on that sense, I have to say that the regulators in Israel and the authorities in Israel has been super supportive to different technology initiatives, even with regards to incubating program, accelerator program, dated back to 1948, when the country was first basically established. And now today, if we're even speaking about cryptocurrencies and about different fintech applications and blockchain applications, I can say that the regulator in Israel is extremely equated. He's working a lot to understand the industry, to be meeting not only with, players from the regulation and law side, but also to be meeting with industry players, with service providers players such as Deloitte, for example, and others, with technology players, to truly understand what are the requirements from these technology companies in order to build for them an enabling framework program. We're seeing that, by the way, in other countries, all right? So, for example, in Asia, they're also building some kind of sandbox that are supported by the government to have some kind of a silo, to be experimenting with those technologies and to make sure that we really have the relevant frameworks and paradigms. So I think that this is something that Europe should consider or adopt, meaning, building it and making it something that the government can from one angle supervise on, but from the other, enable the industry to flourish.
Excellent. What about the other stakeholders of the ecosystem, the corporates, the public sector that maybe can use this technology also for their own application and to develop their services for the public sector further?
Yeah. So we're seeing many more industries that are entering that, many more enterprises. Obviously, big multinational players are experimenting more and more. Israel, like I said, is becoming more and more of a hub for global technology players to build even their blockchain R&D center in Israel, right? Because of the amazing talent that we have here, because of the large scale of technological companies that we have here. We're seeing, I would say, more and more industry consortiums that are being established, obviously not only in Israel, but abroad, with the notable one from the financial service industry being, for example, the R3 Banking Consortium, the B3I Insurance Consortium. We have other IoT consortium by Bosch, for example. We have different blockchain project, Hyperledger, for example, which includes both technological players such as IBM, but also JP Morgan, for example, is part of it. So we're seeing more and more enterprises that are joining forces for it. And I think it's a great sign that the different industry players are experimenting, different even industry segments are trying to understand how to basically utilize this application. And I think we will see much more of them coming along.
We've been discussing in Austria also about the possible use cases of blockchain, but also about not possible use cases. So at the beginning, we had the impression that we all tend to think that blockchain will change the world in every single field. But there are limits to the use cases of this technology, or better said, there are certain features that are super, super important for certain use cases, but may not make sense for any other. What is your experience? You've been working with these technologies in 3-4 years in Israel, have a lot of, so to say, insights in your corporate partners. What are the best use cases and what works already now?
So first to say it's true. I mean, the blockchain technology has its own characteristics and feature. And like every other technological solution, it needs to be used only when the relevant use case is indeed the right for it. And this is applicable for any technology whatsoever, and even more so for a technology such as the blockchain. Like I said before, the technology is still early, meaning that some features of some infrastructure can support some use cases and others cannot. This is why we're seeing, by the way, different frameworks that are evolving, right? From the first Bitcoin blockchain towards Ether and towards Stellar and towards other protocol, where each one of them is basically focusing on different features, enabling different attributes and capabilities. And to know and to understand whether a use case, whether the blockchain is relevant for a specific use case, is obviously to test which features you need to be supporting. So if we're talking, for example, about scalability, the ability to support high volume of transaction, some blockchain platforms are more relevant for that than others.
Bitcoin will not be relevant at all in this case.
It will be less relevant. It will be more challenging, of course. And this is why we have so many others. And again, I think that the main element to remember or to understand whether blockchain application is indeed the right one or not technological one, because the technology is still in a set. but it will advance. It will reach wherever it needs to reach. It will meet whatever technological requirements that the markets will request it to do so. In order to do so, I think that the elements who are more important to consider are obviously the business-wise, meaning how does the business value chain, how does the business operation looks like, and then to see how basically you can make it, use basically the blockchain to make it the more efficient.
When you advise your partners and help them try it out, so to say, in a sandbox, do their first use cases, do you use the public blockchains? Do you use the permissioned blockchains? How do you go ahead of that?
So again, it's also super dependent on the use case. So I would say that since I'm mostly focusing on the financial service industry, most projects with financial service industries are using private blockchain, right? And permissioned, obviously, blockchain, because you really want to leverage and to make existing financial process more efficient. And it's not a framework that involves all that wants to enter to this framework. But other use cases obviously can include public one. Again, it's a super question of the industry and of the specific use case that you want to basically solve.
Do you think the banks it will open up to working with this technology? At the beginning, we said blockchain will, so to say, ruin the banks. It will take their business away because we don't need the intermediary anymore. Now we see banks thinking of implementing and using this technology to develop their use cases. What's the status here in Israel?
Yeah. So first, I think that the blockchain revolution, so to speak, is very much similar to what we've witnessed with the Fintech Revolution around 3 years ago, where many Fintech emerges. We've seen dozens and hundreds of dozens of Fintechs coming up all around the world. And many thought that the Fintechs are going to replace traditional existing FSI. But in the end, this is not the case. I mean, banks and insurance companies will not disappear. Even in the fintech, we're seeing more and more a tendency towards collaboration, towards integration, towards really finding the balance between internal development of the FSI, of the financial institutions, and externalizing some capabilities in order to reach to the maximum level of efficiency. I think we will see the same, even more so in the blockchain, because a technology with such big potential needs to be, I would say, a company with the right educated hands that are familiar with the existing processes. And yes, it has the potential to change existing processes. They will change. But again, I think that you need to have both sides in order to really reach maximum impact.
I've heard some banks thinking about the ICO, the technology, the blockchain technology behind it, to also maybe implement placing a bond, or in fields of IPOs to use this technology. Do you see some use cases here? Would that be advisable for the banks?
There are already use cases by the way, because the idea basically what this immutable database enables you to do is basically to make, so to speak, unliquid assets liquid. And since everything is being registered, it can basically tremendously improve trade efficiency. It can make the validation process much more efficient and also the settlement process. So we've seen, for example, in 2015, a product, an initiative by the NASDAQ, which is called Links, that tried basically to register untraded, unpublicly companies on top of a distributed ledger. We're seeing more and more like that. And obviously it's an amazing field to explore and to experiment with, where the blockchain technology can absolutely assist.
In terms of non-liquid asset classes, investments in real estate would probably have the same use case here as well.
Exactly. And real estate is one of, I would say, the industries that is looking more and more on blockchain exactly because of that. First, because the fact that you can register different assets on top of one ledger makes many operations and activity much more efficient and easier. And be exactly like you said, because you can make unliquid assets liquid.
The beginning of the hype, so to say, some people say in Austria, drawed a lot of attention to the so-called dumb money that was invested. Now we want to have institutional investors investing here, having a regulated frameworks which can guarantee also for the institutional investors to invest. Do you see this trend coming? Will it be imaginable that, I don't know, a pension institution from Austria would invest in the blockchain technology?
Yeah. So we are seeing in the last year more, I would say, institutional investors that are entering that, some venture capital and other, more serious players that are entering that field. I think that for insurance companies do look at it, right? Even wealth management funds do look at cryptocurrencies and on ICO as another instrument to invest, but there's still a long path to do so, because these institutions are obviously much more regulated. They have much more public responsibility on the funds that they are holding. So until we will reach the time where they can literally invest those funds in different crypto assets, I think we still have some time ahead. But I think that in the end, after the regulatory framework will, become one and become something which is much more structured and defined, I think that we will be able to do so, and we will see that happening.
as a media publisher for startups and digital economy entrepreneurs, we generally tend to be happy about deregulation in general. But in the fields of blockchain and ICO, we are strongly believers, so to say, that we need stronger regulation in order to enable professionalization of this process. Would you agree on that, or do we not need any new regulatory frameworks here?
Absolutely. I think that regulation is extremely important whenever being introduced with new technologies in general, and especially when we're speaking about a technology like that. Because what we've seen with the blockchain and with regulators around the world is that, as a society, we always try to assimilate and basically to accumulate existing regulatory framework on new technologies and on new assets. And sometimes it works, but sometimes, such as in the crypto case, right, maybe it's time to come up with a new regulatory framework. And basically it's the consequences of the character of the technology. The fact that this technology is so, cross-border impact really implies and basically almost dictates to have a new regulatory framework, which is encompassing on a global scale. So absolutely, I think that regulatory is important. And even if obviously it's challenging to come up with new framework, and especially international wise, but even if we won't be able to do so, I would strongly recommend, and we're already seeing it, by the way, with startups and different initiatives who are embracing standardization since day one, who are embracing some kind of a governance model for their applications in order to have some kind of, a validation step, making sure that and showing basically the public that they are indeed valid and legit.
Perfect. We've invited a couple of people here. I will look at the audience if we have any questions here. We have one question. We have. Can you elaborate on data privacy on the blockchain? Obviously, a very important question as well, because we always say one of the assets of blockchain is the transparency. At the same time, I don't want to have my bank transaction known to the whole wide world.
Of course. In terms of security, blockchain is really regarded as the infrastructure itself is regarded, the database is regarded as super secure, right? Because of the cryptographical character of it, and because of the, I would say, super high computational power that it will take in order to breach him. In terms of privacy and how much data is being shared, again, different platforms and different frameworks are enabling different levels of anonymity. So obviously there are, like the public permissionless blockchain, which is completely, I would say, anonymous. So it can serve some features, but obviously if we want to work on blockchain for financial industry, then obviously we will use different platforms that enable other levels of anonymity.
That means the technology can be used in a way that we can solve the problem raised.
Yes, indeed.
Another question, yes. Okay. Are ICOs a competition to venture capital investors, if I understand it correctly?
I think that in a way they are a bit challenging of existing venture capital activities. I think that, putting aside the fact that it has a cryptographical character of ICO, I think that the whole world of crowdfunding and of different, sources of allocations of fund is changing. And this, I think, goes hand in hand with the shared economy features that we're seeing in different industries, not solely on that. So I think that from that aspect, yes, I think we're seeing even more Kickstarters projects, that are raising funds from the public. On that sense. On the other sense, like I said, still venture capital, when they choose to invest, they have a different mindset and different aspirations from their investment, right? Everything is being calculated. They expect to get some kind of return after, 7 years, 10 years, etc. ICO basically enables you a more, I would say, liquid assets, right? Because you can get out of the investment much quicker. You can also choose which portion you wish to invest. You don't have to invest the entire 7 million. You can just invest the exact sum that you wish to invest. And again, I think it offers the public of a new investment tool, which can be, I would say, even enhancing for the public itself. That doesn't need to be always so dependent on other venture capital. And you can say, hey, I'm as a private investor can invest my money in different technological initiatives without having a capital fortune of 100 million. So I think that it does bring a new, refreshing statement.
Our venture capital companies in Austria were very cautious and careful about the blockchain investments so far, and especially about ICO investments. If they invest, they want to invest in the equity of the company. Do you see some differences in Israel?
No, I think that this is quite representative of what we're seeing. Again, when venture capital chooses to enter a technological initiative, they want to have their equity, they want to have their influence, both on the direction that the company is going, but both with regards to technology, business model, even the team, they want to have those kind of influence. So obviously they will want an equity. But again, many ICOs are starting as raising first round of pre-ICO with equity, moving towards the post-ICO, which is not equity. We're seeing different models, much more flexible than before.
will it be possible to tokenize the company shares in terms of making it attractive also for venture capital investments in the company, as it would be sort of equal to owning the equity in the company, sort of equity tokens?
Yeah, this is basically the idea of security tokens that behaves such as having an equity in a firm, whether it's an early stage startup or it's a publicly traded company. This is exactly the direction that we're going. The answer is yes.
Final question. Direction that we'll be going is a perfect bridge. Which direction will be the blockchain technology going to, let's say, in the next 5 years? Where do you see the developments? Where do you see the maturity and the use cases?
So I think that more industries will enter this field. I think we will see more, even more than proof of concept, but also production-ready use cases. And we in Deloitte were saying, actually, in the past 2 years, that this year is the make or break year of the blockchain, meaning the year that really this technology will reach to market adaptation. So I think that, honestly, 2018, 2019 will really be the years where we will see concrete use cases in different industries. I think that the financial service industry is the first one to adopt it, followed by the insurance, obviously, which is part of the financial industry, followed by the healthcare industries and government industries. And we are already seeing governments worldwide that are experimenting with it, either by using distributed ledger, for example, for digital identity for citizens, such as the Netherlands, or on the contrary, companies and countries and governments that are choosing to tie their currency to existing cryptocurrencies, all right, such as Venezuela, for example, that just announced last week to tie their country currency to the petrol, exactly, which is really a unique phenomenon, and time will tell where it will go. But I think we will see more usages of that, more use cases in more creative way. But absolutely, I think that the technology is here to stay. I think that it has a lot of use cases. I think that blockchain can really redefine industries, business processes, and even the way that we look today on global trade and even on economy.
Final question. You said technology is here to stay. In a few sentences before, you said 2018 and 19 are the years of make or break, but you do believe in the future of technology. I do
believe. I think it's a make or break again, because I don't think that we've ever experienced a technology that has caused such a huge buzz around it, such as cryptocurrencies and blockchain and distributed ledger. So we need to have something, concrete. And again, there are a lot of experiments, a lot of POCs, a lot of projects, but we need to see something, and we already are. And I think that in the next 2 years, we will see more and more of that. But I absolutely have faith in the technology.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thank you for being with us. I hope it was very interesting. For me, it was definitely. And we keep in touch with developments and to learn from your ecosystem. Thank you and ciao.